about classroom climate, I want to say thank you to all of you for giving up your time. We've had, to be honest, a truly incredible response to this webinar. I think the first one we ran, it's our first one obviously of 2015, and we ran 4 towards the end of last year. I think we had about 30 or 40 people show up to the very first webinar, or to register for the first webinar, and what we noticed this afternoon was we had 184 people who have who've registered for this one. So not only are we really delighted that the people are jumping on with the value that we hope that we're able to offer you and your school, but we're also really mindful and we pay really close attention to what are the themes that are capturing people's attention. And clearly this idea, I guess, of a classroom climate or a classroom culture, and I'll unpack what we mean by climate and culture very shortly, is one that has gotten people's attention. So we might as well start to get to work on that whole concept, because there's one thing that we do know about classroom climate is that it's affected by it's most impacted by the #1 stressor of teachers, and that is undoubtedly student behaviour. So what we're trying to do is, instead of actually coming up with strategies today, which would be me sitting here saying, here are the top 10 strategies that effective teachers use, go and use these and you'll get better behaviour from your students. What we're saying is, what are the conditions, what's the climate, what's the culture that we're immersing our students in every single day, and how can we create a climate or a culture that impacts their behaviour positively. So it's a pretty simple one. I actually kind of like the metaphor of thinking about our classroom climate and the concept of climate change, because I think that not only when we're talking about classroom climate, a little bit like when we do talk about climate change, where there's no universal agreement on whether it exists or what we should do about it, or indeed if we should be doing anything about it. It's probably one of those topics like climate change that 20 years ago didn't really exist, and that was because 20 years ago we had a much stronger focus on what we taught than how we taught. And as we know, as the societies and indeed our students become more complex and more diverse and present with a wider variety of backgrounds and challenges and also hopes and aspirations, we certainly need to adjust the how we teach, and the what we teach can follow that. So as we know that in any 1-hour webinar, and I'm delighted that so many people are keen and jumping on board, as we know there's only so much that can be achieved in a 1-hour webinar. So I want to get really clear about what my promise is to you today. I want to be really absolutely upfront about what it is that you will get out of sitting down for an hour and putting the feet up, but hopefully interacting a little bit in a webinar this afternoon. My big promise to you is that at the end of today you will not be Dennis Denuto any longer. Dennis Denuto was that fantastic character from the castle who tried to describe the Constitution to the High Court judges and told them it was the vibe of the thing. And unfortunately, we all get a little bit Dennis Denuto when we're talking about climate and culture. And so my big promise to you today is that you will not be Dennis Denuto after this 1 hour. There might be some stuff that we've still got to work on, but you will be absolutely clear on what a classroom climate and how it is, and how it is contributing to the culture of your school. So that's my big promise, and so you have to hold me accountable to that. And if we get to our Q&A session, I'm going to be very strict on myself today about ensuring that I get to the end of the webinar and allow about 10 minutes for question time. So I'll talk about that in a minute. But what I want you to be is absolutely hard on me about making sure that at the end of today you are clear on what we are talking about when we are talking about classroom climate. All right, let's do the housekeeping stuff. All right, so for our people who are new to the caper, new to the webinar caper, I want to make sure that you've got full understanding of what you're in for today. You will see on your screen undoubtedly a little control panel, a little dashboard, if you will, for how you can interact in the webinar today, and I want you to take control of that control panel. There's a couple of ways that you can interact. Number one is that you can put your hand up, which is very handy for an education and school-based audience. So you'll see a little button with a hand there, and I'm going to adjust my little attendee list here to make sure that I see straight away when somebody has their hand up. So what I am going to do is I'm going to make an assumption that if you put your hand up today, it's because you've got something to say or ask. And if we can, then what I will do is make sure that we defer to you. I'll unmute you and give you the opportunity to say what you need to say. So that means you'll either need to be sitting on a laptop that has the speaker or the microphone enabled and ready to go, or you might have a headset on or something like that. But that doesn't mean you're limited if you can't do that today as well, because we also have a chat section. And if you look down at your dashboard, you'll see where that chat box is, and you can put anything you like in that chat box. I will try very hard to keep an eye on what appears in the chat box. But sometimes I do get a little distracted, and I may get to it a little later than when you make that comment or ask that question. And I guess that's because sometimes when I'm running a webinar, I feel a little bit like I'm I'm in charge of the organ at the cathedral. There's lots of buttons and levers to pull as we go, and while I do that, I want to make sure that I stay really focused on delivering you those key messages around what classroom climate is genuinely all about. Like I said, it's, when we're actually working through an hour on classroom climate, it's difficult to get absolutely everything in. So my determination is over the next hour is to go absolutely crazy and to go like a bullet again, and to make sure that we cover as much valuable content for you as we possibly can. And then at the end, I'll let you know how you might be able to engage in finding out a lot more about how you can contribute and how you can build and how you can invest in yourself and all of those kinds of things to be able to make sure that you have a successful classroom climate. So before we really get kicking, the three big pieces that you'll learn about today is, number one, we're going to learn about how we can define classroom climate or culture, eliminating that dinner factor. The second thing we're going to look at is how we can focus on climate and what is it that we need to pay attention to if we wish to improve climate, and then we're going to look at how we can plan for classroom climate to improve. And believe me, in a short space of time, that may sound like a lot to cover, and it may sound like you're about to start drinking from a fire hose, and that may be the case. But the planning that you can do to begin focusing on climate is something that you might be surprised at how simple it really is. So let's get ourselves started, and the best way I think to get started is to start to find out who it is that I've got in the audience today, who it is that wants to find this information out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a poll that lets me know where you come from. So what I'm going to do is open a poll that says which best describes your reason for being here today. So I know also that we've got some people who are going off one registration, and we've got a whole room of people who are in on the webinar today. So I'm hoping one of them has the keyboard or has the mouse in hand, and if you can give me an idea what best describes your group or your reason for being here today. So I want to find out, are you a primary teacher, are you a middle or secondary teacher, are you in special ed, are you a school or a team leader in your school, and does that best describe your role for being here today? Are you in a school support or a tutoring role or another role in your organisation? And if you can jump on there and let us know, and I can see immediately we have a very responsive crowd, because we've got nearly 80% of people have voted already, to give me a really strong idea of where we're at there. I'm going to let you go for a little bit longer to see if we can get those last few votes in to make sure that we're really clear, but I've got a very succinct message on where we're at when we're talking about this. All right, we've got nearly to 90% of people voted, and I reckon that's a pretty good result. So I'm going to close the poll there and share the results with you so you can see. And what we've got there is one of the things that's really clear to me is that 68% of the people here are teachers. So first things first is we've got people in the room who are practitioners, so I need to make sure that I that I adjust the material today to make sure it's very practical, very hands-on for those people. Got a handful of people who are in special ed role. Welcome. It's great to have people who are here in a very strong interventionist position. We've got some school leaders as well who might be interested to stay with us, the school leaders, until the very end. I've got our next webinar is very much around your role, so I want you to hang around for that at the end of today. And we'll make sure that we let you know about what's in hand for helping the people who are practitioners to be able to do that even better. And yeah, so we've got some people also in a school support or tutoring role, which is great too. I worked with a school over at Werribee the other day who had an incredible group of people who were in the school support and tutoring type space, and they are invaluable when we're talking about climate. If we are going to say that climate has a straight line to it, to student behaviour, then we need to be very upfront about the fact that the role that those people play in dealing with those kids is absolutely critical. So I want to encourage all of you who have let me know a little bit about who you are to make sure that you interact today. So think about putting your hand up, think about making a comment in the chat box. I'll try to keep an eye on that and do my organist role as well as I possibly can. And I want you to also remember that you're going to have a very specific opportunity to ask questions when we get to our Q&A session at the end of today. So thank you so much for those people who have jumped on and answered the poll, and let's get going with the next stage. So I guess what I want to do is go a little bit further again. So let's run one more poll to make sure that you've got the hang of that. This is going to be an interactive session. It's not going to be an opportunity to sit with the feet up. What I want to know today is, when it comes to the idea of student behaviour, what's your biggest challenge? What is it that's the hardest part? What's the big leap that you need to make, like the goldfish here, to be able to have the highest impact in terms of improving culture? Because that's what we're looking for today. We want to, I don't want to bother you today and waste an hour of your time going through all the different hypotheticals. Let's find out exactly what it is that is your biggest challenge. So the 5 options I've got for you there are: student attitudes towards the teacher. Is it about student capability to collaborate? Is it their ability to work together? Is it about student behaviours towards each other and the way that they behave towards each other? Is it about how you can actually get cracking on building a community of learners? Or is it about how you can establish clear, high and sustainable expectations in the learning environment? So there's a little bit to chew on there, a little bit to think about. So we'll give you just a fraction longer here to have your say, but clearly we've got some people who know exactly why they are here today. 40% of people have voted so far, so now we're getting up towards 60% of people, which is really fantastic. And what we're finding, I guess, is a bit of an even spread here by the looks of it. So I'll close the poll in about 5 seconds, so jump in now or forever hold your peace, as the case may be. All right, we've got ourselves over 80%, which is a really good sample. So I'm going to close that poll now and share the results with you. What we can see there is a really even spread. And what that tells us is that there are multiple entry points here. And I want to be really clear about that, that when you are looking to try and improve your culture or improve the climate of your classroom, I'm not about to tell you this is where you start, because that information needs to be highly contextualised. So there are multiple entry points for improving the climate of your classroom, and I would suggest that while the poll indicates that we have a wide cross-section of people and a wide variety of entry points, it's your entry point that counts. So look for opportunities today. What the highest there is about how you can establish clear, high and sustainable expectations, but we also have significant representation across the board. So make sure you look today for your opportunity and your area that you're going to get the greatest traction from in addressing your climate of your classroom. So I'm just going to hide those results again now, and then we'll be able to get back on with the rest of the show. Rightio. So let's get cracking on defining classroom climate. And I guess one of the things that I first want to say is that, we do get people who say, that, oh, what's the difference between climate and culture? And the truth is, I basically think it's nothing. I think we come to use many terms interchangeably in schools depending on which one seems the most palatable to us. I think that, for instance, one is punishment and consequences. In the old days, we were more than happy to call it a punishment, but then that word sounded a bit nasty, so we changed it to consequences. But the truth is we mean basically the same thing. And as is the case when we're talking about classroom climate, it just seems to be that we've got a habit of talking about school culture, and what we've got a habit also about is referring to that culture when we apply it over a classroom as being a climate. And I'm more than comfortable with that. So you'll hear me interchange between the two terms quite regularly because really we're talking about the same thing. So let's get that on the table straight away. I also want to get on the table that it's probably at this point that people grab their notepads and start taking notes, and that's all well and good. More than happy for you to take notes and make sense of things, but if you are taking notes today to remember what is happening in this webinar, stop it now. So I want you to stop that because we're going to send you a video of this. You can go and watch it over and over again to get what you need to do. And the other part about it is if you want the slides, I'll give them to you. So let's get our interactive there. We've got our admin manager, Chris, who's online today for this webinar too, and she's an absolute superstar. And if you go to the chat box now and type yes, please, Chris will notice you have gone to the chat box, and she's going to send you the slide deck from today so that you can have all of this, and you can even go and talk to your colleagues about that. So if you would like to receive the slide deck, just grab the keyboard and click in that chat box and just write yes, please. You click enter, and Chris will take notice of your name and make sure that you receive those slides. So when we are talking about defining classroom climate, there's lots and lots of different definitions around that, and I think the most succinct one is this: that basically what we're talking about when we're addressing our classroom climate is the set of behaviours that are both encouraged and those that are tolerated. And what that's all about is the notion that a classroom climate is both created and revealed informally. So what we know about climate is, and culture is that the conversations that reveal it often happen informally. So you'll hear those conversations around corners. You'll hear it when you're letting the students into your classroom. You'll hear it when they're on the playground. You'll hear it when they're on the bus. And you'll hear it when they're in the most informal places. And that's because culture and climate is both created at the informal end also. So what we're not talking about here is the concept that we can set a classroom climate. So for instance, we might decide at the start of the year that if we set the rules and we set those expectations and put them in place, that it'll be nice and easy for us to be able to maintain those. And that's not how climate or culture is created. It is the set of behaviours that are used by every individual in there that are both encouraged and tolerated. So it's a very behavioural focus we're taking, and so that links us back to that concept that we mentioned earlier on, that building climate and culture is very much connects strongly to student behaviour. So make sure that we're making sure that we're thinking about student behaviour, the way they're interacting and the way they're working together as we're going forward. There are several things that you'll need to do to be able to establish a successful classroom climate, and one of them might be beginning by coming to a webinar, but it's unlikely to be the final one. So what we know for sure is there are certain things that stand to reason when we're trying to establish a classroom climate or a culture, and that undoubtedly is that first of all we're going to need to be patient and we're going to need to take our time. So if you, for instance, are struggling with student behaviour in your classroom, don't think that there's a quick fix. In fact, if you are able to come up with a magic strategy that works really well tomorrow in your class, I think that's fantastic, and congratulations, and go and get yourself a lovely glass of champagne at the end of Friday at 3:30 if that's what you think you deserve as a reward. But one magic strategy is likely to be a honeymoon. So what we are talking about when we're creating conditions that produce the very best behaviours from our young people, what we are saying is that that actually takes time. It takes patience, and we're going to have to allow ourselves that to build that culture. It isn't something that you can set and forget once. The next thing is that it takes explicit support. So picking up on the fact that we had 13% of our audience today as school leaders, the role of the school leader in providing that explicit support around building culture and climate is absolutely critical. We need to make sure that that support's not just wandering past the classroom and saying, how you going? Oh, you should be doing that, Jamie, please sit down. That's implicit support. What we're talking about is explicit support, which means we need to have structures in place that allow teachers who want to improve the climate of their classroom to be able to be mentored, to be able to find new information and to be able to make sense of that information. If we don't structure for that to happen, we're going to get busy and it ain't going to happen. So if you're in a teaching role, 68% of the people are here, but what I want you to do if you're looking today to establish a more conducive, a more relational, a more productive classroom climate is to go and seek that explicit support. How many times do you think the person who's leading you could sit down with you and have a very explicit conversation around your classroom climate throughout 2015? So let's make sure that that support isn't, just hope it happens along the way. Let's make sure that we're very explicit about improving it. And to that effect, what we really need is somebody to talk to. The very best approaches, as we know, to teach a professional learning are those where you can see somebody else teach, and number two is where you get the opportunity to talk to somebody else about that. So it means what we need to do is to create safe and comfortable spaces and environments in our schools where people can sit down and have informal dialogue about practice. And for a lot of schools that's rare. We sit down often and have formal dialogue around operations of the school, and sometimes we sit down and we have informal dialogue about the operations of the school, but we don't often sit down and structure to have informal dialogue about our practice. And that's what we very much need to do, and it needs to be really focused. It needs to be something that we know exactly what it is that we're working on, and we've got somebody who we go to and have conversations with about that. Now, if you're a classroom teacher, I think that it's critically important that if you can find a leader who can support you in that, great, but it doesn't need to be. So find somebody else, find a colleague who might be able to give you a hand and structure a way that you can have a coffee twice a term to sit down and talk about the particular practice element that you're working on. The next thing you'll need is multiple learning channels. So while I am absolutely delighted that 184 people decided to register for a webinar on classroom climate, a webinar is not the only way that you should be learning around how to build climate. What we are talking about now is being able to be well read, go and find out what it is that you can use. Our members who are online today will know about the articles that they're sent every month around teacher practice, and that can provide us a new channel to learn from. We want to be able to go and learn from each other. So one of the channels that you can learn from is to be able to, say, once a term, go and watch another teacher teach in your planning time. And seek multiple different ways that you can get assistance to be able to move forward. It's unlikely to happen from one video, from one workshop, from one book, from one reading, from one conversation, but it will happen as a result of all of those channels being in play. I often say that building a great classroom climate is a little bit like, it's Pantene teaching. It won't happen overnight, but it will happen. Very corny dad joke there just to keep us moving. The next thing I want you to do is to make sure that you access expertise on this. So look for the teachers in your school who really do have a great classroom climate, and look for the strategies and look for the approaches that they use that work. The reason I want you to go first to the teachers in your school is that their practice and expertise is very already contextualised. So they've already been able to take something clever and to apply it in your context, which is really exciting. So we want some of that practice to be deprivatised in your school. I spoke to a teacher recently who told me that the very best teaching is 90% theft, and I think that's probably true. What we should be doing is sharing all of that practice and not hiding it away in classrooms or in pockets of the school. Further, I want you to look for expertise outside of the school. So look for areas that you can find out about particular challenges. I'm a massive Bill Rogers fan, I'm a massive Andrew Fuller fan, and all of the resources that you can find like that are worth getting your head into. We often will read heavily to get our consciousness around a new literacy approach, or we'll research to find out how we can implement ICT. We don't look for stuff often about practice. So there are experts out there who can help you and to be be able to help you get going. One of my favourites is Jo Lang, who's done some terrific work in as a behavioural psychologist, and so looking up her work can be something that can make a real difference too. The next thing we need to be really clear on is investment. So it takes investment of both your time and your professional learning allocation. So that means, if we are, you've got lots of competing opportunities, and the truth is that you can go and spend your PD budget on, a course around ICT, and you can go and spend your PD budget around better programming and planning, or you can go and spend your budget around how you can bust the bullies in your school. I would suggest to you that if the number one stressor of teachers in our schools is student behaviour, then it's our practice that we need to invest in. So it's about the investment of our budget, but it's also the investment of our time. What are we prepared to put the time aside for? And I would like to see an army of really fantastic teachers out there who have made that time investment in themselves and in the practice that they need to use every day in the classroom. And then the other thing that it'll take is ongoing focus. So what we need to do is to make sure that we don't dip ourselves in the idea of a great learning culture. It takes an ongoing commitment, and it takes setting ourselves small tasks, setting ourselves, the goal of achieving something over a couple of weeks, changing behaviour focuses, changing the targets that we want to achieve, and making sure that all the way through the year that we're continuing to sharpen our tools, because as we know, as the year gets away, there'll be nothing worse for you than having to try and cut through the difficulty of halfway through term 4 with blunt tools. So it'll take ongoing sharpening of your tools to get that to happen. So what am I talking about when I say I want you to encourage certain behaviours, and then I want you to be really careful about the behaviours that we're tolerating? So when it comes to encouragement, what I am talking about is being, first of all, crystal clear about what the desired behaviours are that you're looking for. And it's one thing for you to be really clear about what you're looking for. For instance, you might be looking for high levels of collaboration. That's not one that we're looking for often in classroom. Or we're looking for respectful behaviours. It is not clear and not crystal unless it is absolutely crystal clear to the students you teach. And the only way to check on that is whether it's articulated. So really being clear about the fact that this is being brought to attention through all the communicative mechanisms that you have in your classroom is critically important to building a strong climate. I want you to really get clear about rewarding intrinsically and extrinsically that behaviour. So it's important that we tap people on the shoulder and we smile and let people know the affect that's produced when they demonstrate a desired behaviour, whether that's respect or it's responsibility or safety or it's cooperation. It's really important that we show the affect which mobilises that intrinsic worth that people start to attach, but also it's more than valid to bring it to attention extrinsically, which means you can reward with whether it's points or stickers or a pizza lunch raffle or something like that. You certainly can reward that to bring a target behaviour to attention. Some people in the webinar today will be going, oh, I don't like that. I don't like the idea of handing out things for certain behaviours. And I understand that, and that's why we make sure that we remember the 3 R's, which is at the beginning when we're bringing a target behaviour to consciousness, we're looking to reward regularly, and then randomly, and then rarely. So what we're trying to do is to wean them off the extrinsic rewards, thus emphasising the power of the intrinsic rewards. Because extrinsic rewards have a shelf life. So your points that you might hand out for demonstrating responsibility will have an effect for a short period of time, but not forever. So we want to change that regular behaviour. Approximately each fortnight is usually about as long as our young people can hold a behaviour at the top of their consciousness. So what we don't is, I was a real advocate for a while there of systems like Caught Being Good. But what does Caught Being Good look like? For me, I wanted to get more explicit than that. So what I started to do was to reward, for instance, for 2 weeks I would focus on kindness. For 2 weeks I would focus on empathy. I would focus on friendliness and make sure that that focus was changing regularly to keep one focus top of mind. The next thing about your desired behaviours is make sure that you're not an island. So ensure that your behaviours contribute to a whole school foci. Right, so, and then the other thing is to focus on collaboration rather than competition. Schools by nature should be collaborative systems, not competitive. And this is the reason that sometimes our things like tables points or house points systems tend to not have a long-term impact. Is that what we're trying to encourage from our young people is not the notion that they can win points by being so much friendlier than you, I'm the most friendly person in the world. So that sounds counter, doesn't it, to what we're trying to achieve. We do get some, classes, for instance, who will say that, our moniker for what we're trying to achieve is that we're the friendliest class in the school. And people say, no, you're not. And I say, want to bet? And all of a sudden what we've got is decidedly unfriendly behaviour happening. So we want to be clear that we're in a collaborative system, which means that instead of saying we're the friendliest class in the school, to say we are friendly. That's what we do, that's what we stand for, and allow that to stand alone, because that contributes most to that informal idea, and it allows us to be able to make sure that we've got a really strong focus on the positive. So that's what we're trying to achieve through encouraging behaviours. But of course, like I mentioned before, that was only half of the equation. And the other one is, what are the behaviours that we're tolerating? Now, the word tolerate or tolerance is a really important one for us to consider here, because some people will take the view that what we're talking about here is a zero tolerance. That what we do want is absolutely no way are we prepared to take on swearing in the classroom, or will we ever deal with disrespectful behaviour or raising our voice or throwing things and things like that. And of course these are elements that we don't want in our classroom. What we do know about zero tolerance approaches though is they tend to have virtually no impact. So taking a zero tolerance approach is something that's unlikely to have a positive result for you. What we're looking for is how we can confront behaviours that we don't wish to tolerate, and the best way to do that is three key things. We want to do it firmly, we want to do it fairly, and we want to do it consistently. So this is absolutely important, because what we're trying to do here is say that consistency is something that every school strains to achieve, but the only thing we know about consistency is that the worst way to achieve consistency is to try to be consistent. So what we're trying to do here is to find frames and reflective tools that we can use to be consistent. As we know, we would like to be able to consistently put on makeup in the morning, or to in fact shave, and I know that I've got the little short stubbly beard, and if I go to the bathroom in the morning and shave in front of a wall, I will get some very jagged lines in my beard. So what I do is I do it in front of a mirror, because the only way to reflect is if you have something to reflect upon. So what we want to do is to start to look at the frames that we can build upon, the frames that we can reflect upon. So if we are looking for how we can get consistent around high levels of encouragement, and also really high levels and productive ways to confront the behaviours we don't wish to tolerate, then we can look at what sort of culture we get. So for instance, if we look at the bottom left here and say that if we're not encouraging any behaviours and we're not confronting the behaviours that we don't want to tolerate, then what we get is an accidental culture, which means that there's almost no teacher in this. It just happens organically. It just happens while we've got our back to the ocean. If we go high on encouraging certain behaviours, and we talk all the time about the fact that we are a very happy class, we're a friendly class, we show empathy, and all of that there, and when we focus overly on the positive types of affects that we want, then what we find is we limit the teacher influence, and we get a hidden culture. This is actually where terms like subculture come from, where we're walking around talking the talk about how friendly we are, how productive we are, how we always give our personal best. But the truth is that there's something else going on, and that's a subculture, and it might be that there's a subculture of bullying, or there might be a sub that's competitive. And if we don't confront those behaviours, we can expect to have a culture that's occurring that we're not really aware of, that's hidden. If we're all confronting certain behaviours and we spend all our time exhausting ourselves, walking around the classroom picking kids up who are doing the wrong thing, then we get a fearful culture. And in this instance, the influence of the teacher is inflated. You are entirely responsible for the culture that's being created in that environment. And what we do there is that, there's a saying that, a rising tide lifts all ships. And what you're doing here is driving up or down certain behaviours. When we are confronting behaviour all the time, we are driving down negative behaviours. Guess what? We also drive down the positive. So you're entirely responsible for students not wanting to actually behave at all. So we end up with this fearful climate in your classroom. But if we can actually say we've got a really good emphasis on encouraging and confronting behaviours, then what we get is this productive culture. And that's where there's an appropriate teacher influence over the way that you're working. And so what we get there is a really exciting culture where we genuinely can say that we're with the students rather than always either helping them out or believing that we're being a bit Pollyanna in the classroom, and also we're not walking around like the guy at the carnival doing the whack-a-mole game where you're always hitting kids on the head to get those behaviours suppressed in the classroom. We're encouraging certain behaviours, we're confronting the behaviours that we've got a problem with, and from that tends to be a productivity because we get a higher level of learning time. Christine Richmond does a lot of work and has written a fabulous book called Teach More, Manage Less. And that's what we're trying to achieve through this, is we're trying to maximise your opportunity to teach and minimise the need for you to have to constantly hit on the head those behaviours that we've got a significant problem with. Therefore, we think if we can manage our teaching time more effectively and maximise our teaching time more effectively, then what we get is increased program effectiveness. We actually higher levels of student learning, which should be very much at the core of our business. So for you to buy into this, though, I do think that it's really important that we've got to have proof that this stuff works. And so this is a synthesis of research that was put together by Raymond Lewis at La Trobe University quite a few years ago now. But it's a piece of research that I just can't get past. I just think that this is a critically important piece of research that, I think that everybody, I think that every teacher should know, and I think that every teacher should also acknowledge and do something about. So what I mean, the way this data display works is that what Raymond did is he went and had a look at what are the 6 default responses by teachers that are deployed by teachers when they're confronted with poor student behaviour. So what we have here is if we were to choose punishment, discussion, recognition, aggression, involvement or hinting, what are the impacts on the headings at the top? So what's the impact on distraction, on negativity to the teacher and whether the action is justified? So to explain the data display very briefly, what we've got is if we get a 0.00 result, that's a no change in the heading at the top. If you get a positive number, that's an increase in the heading at the top by that factor. And if you get a negative result, that's a decrease in that heading at the top by that factor. So I just want to look at really quickly those first 2 lines, punishment and discussion, because they're probably 2 that, they probably describe the trip that we're trying to make in moving from what we do to how we do it. In the old days, if we were confronted with a negative behaviour, we might punish. We might say, you know what, I've had enough. And I've been trying to teach this class for the last 15 minutes, and you, Mr. Jones, have been jumping around and causing all sorts of distraction in the classroom. I've seen you throw something at the student across the room. You've been on your mobile phone, doing all sorts of shenanigans. You need to get out of here. Get in the corner, stand there, stand in the corner, and have a good hard think about how you should behave in my maths class. So that might be a punishment. We've sent a student to the corner. What we know about the way that we change behaviour is that we need to think about behaviour before we can change it. So my example of that to you is that none of you woke up this morning, the 184 people, none of us woke this morning on a diet. So what I mean by that is that you had to think about it first before you could accidentally find yourself on a diet. And that thinking will have been prompted by a moment. So you may have seen an infomercial at 1:30 in the morning for some really yummy chocolate shakes that you're supposed to live off. Or you may have seen a photo of yourself 5 years ago. Or you may have gone away and with a relative who's lost 10 kilo and decided that you would like to do something about that. And so you've made a decision as a result of the thinking that has occurred. So what's happened is that every time we take an action, we generate thinking. So if you can imagine that student in the corner and ask ourselves, what's the thinking that we've generated? Well, it's likely that they're distracted from their behaviour. In fact, we see that in the data, that their distraction has gone up. So we've got a problem there. Okay, they're not thinking about their behaviour anymore. Negativity to the teacher has also gone up because they're likely saying, "Okay, students, I'm going to hate that bloke. I'll fix him up next time." Funnily enough, that the action is justified has also gone up ever so slightly. So what we've got effectively is a student in the corner who knows why they're there. They just hate me because of it and refuse to think about their behaviour. So that's not pole position, is it? The second option there is discussion, which is about just going to a student and saying, "What's going on?" Just to answer that question, distraction goes down. They have to think about what's going on to be able to articulate an answer. Negativity to the teacher also goes down quite significantly. So what we've got here is a relationship that actually improves because we confronted the behaviour. If you look right to the bottom of the data display, you see that the behaviour improves if I hint. I give an idea that, maybe perhaps being on the mobile phone is not a good idea right now. The relationship's okay, it improves, but ever so slightly. But more than 3 times effect comes from actually confronting the behaviour with a discussion or what we call a Socratic approach, asking a question. And then the action is justified has gone up 4 times higher than if we were to punish. So for me, I just reckon we actually have a prerogative to acknowledge research like that and to allow it to impact our way we go about working. So I'm going to notice here that I've got a hand up at the moment, so I can see that Amanda has her hand up. So Amanda, I'm going to unmute you at this point while I click through to the next slide and just see if you've got a question or a comment you'd like to make at this stage. Amanda, can you hear me?
Am I able to do the 60th?
Amanda, sorry, I'm just struggling with you. Amanda, have you got me?
McDowell Village Childcare. So we're in Brisbane.
Me gets the idea that Amanda has put her hand up accidentally, so that's cool. We'll mute Amanda again and move on. Here's what I want you to do now, though. Let's make sure that we're awake and we're using our question box, in the chat box or the question box. Would you please, right now, tell me what's been your light bulb so far? What's the one thing that's come to you that you've realised in the last 40 or so minutes that we've spent together that you're going to use? What's the one little nugget that you're going to take away and do something with straight away? So let's get some comments there from people. What are you going to use? Just looking to see what we get here. What's been the most valuable thing for you so far? The 3 R's. Thanks, Vikram. Great to know that. Okay, really important stuff to make sure that we, rewards only last year. It's one of those things. If you think, even if you think as adults, that the whole idea of a Christmas bonus, which obviously doesn't happen very much in schools, in corporations, Christmas bonuses are something that people really value the first time it happens, and then next time around it becomes something that we absolutely expect. So Katie has talked about the changing focus every fortnight. Okay, really important. Don't fall for the trap of just rewarding being good. It will wear off by the end of the year. Gary's got here less aggressive or apparent aggressive teacher reaction. That's right. And look, sometimes we can understand where that comes from. We want to be in control. We want to be really, we want to be the pivotal person that sets the standard in that classroom. Unfortunately, when we do it aggressively, what we do is we suppress all behaviour. And that includes all of those behaviours that are really productive. So that's really important. Britt has written for us here, behaviours are expected and tolerated. Yes, that's right. So we've got to be really focused on both. And one of the traps that we have in building culture and climate in the classroom is that we often from one to the other. So what we're talking about is, one week we're really big on making sure that we are encouraging positive behaviours, and the next week, everything's a little bit out of control. We better hit them on the head. We better go with confronting behaviours. And what we want to do is make sure that we are getting a good mix, because that's a consistent climate and culture. Amy's picked up on that teach more, manage less kind of idea. John is suggesting that we need to keep calm. Great stuff there. Janine up at Lake Boga, up on the Murray there. I'm really looking forward to coming visiting you guys in the next couple of weeks. Has picked up on that notion that kids can only retain focus for 2 weeks. And after that, we're pretty much, needing a new behaviour. And what that reflects is some of the research around, many of us, if we've got a behaviour focus, we'll put it up in the room, we'll make a sign, or we'll write it on the whiteboard. And what we know about signs is that by the time you have seen it out 7 times, you stop seeing it. So it needs to change for us to get our attention, and that's why companies will pay for big billboards around on freeways, but they'll only pay for it for a short period of time, because once you've seen it a few times, you're not going to see it again. So thank you so much. We've got some really fabulous suggestions there. I did promise you early on that we would start to look at how you can plan. Now, I get amazed sometimes when I talk to people about how they're going about their classroom management. They've got some great ideas, they've got some great practices that they're using, and I can ask a whole staff room a lot of the time and say, do you write a plan? Do you write a classroom management plan? Not for what you're going to teach, not a program for English or for maths or for history or for PE, but do you have a classroom management plan for how you're going to teach? I reckon my response rate is around maybe 3 to 5% of teachers who put their hand up. So what I'm on about here is trying to grow that 3 to 5%. I'm not going to do it by asking you to write another 10 pages. I want to do it by suggesting to you that you write 1. And all I want you to do to get really clear about is what are the reactive strategies that you have in place, and start to list them and start to think about because obviously these are our confrontational strategies. These are our strategies that we're using to confront behaviour. And then what are our proactive strategies? And if we can list what it is that we're doing that allows us to encourage positive behaviour, then that's when we find that that we're doing things that bring to attention those positive behaviours that we're looking for. You can probably imagine that there's a reason that these 2 lists I'm asking for you to begin with are side by side, and that is so you can look at your balance. If we're big on the active and low on the proactive, then we find ourselves in whack-a-mole mode, and unfortunately creating that fearful climate in the classroom. If we find ourselves in that proactive mode, but we don't have many reactive strategies, then we tend to find that we get that hidden culture, subculture start to emerge in our classroom that we have a low level of awareness around. So when it comes to the idea, like I promised you, this was about making a really simple start. So for school leaders online and for teachers that are online and we're here because they want a more productive classroom climate, just can't encourage more strongly the idea of making sure that you start to list your reactive versus your proactive strategies. We're not looking for perfection, we're just looking for a reasonable balance. And then I guess the last thing that I want to touch on today before we get into what you might like to do next and how you also, and we'll have a little bit of Q&A time also, is the idea of making reflection a feature of your school. And if it's not a feature of your school, you need a feature of at least the way you practice. I know that when I stand in front of the mirror, I can, obviously the male intention sometimes is that I'll see something in the mirror that's not entirely realistic, and I'll think, wow, I'm looking really fit and buff these days. The reality may be less that, and that's because we tend sometimes to not reflect honestly. What we know about looking in the mirror from a female perspective is that females tend to do the opposite. They'll look in the mirror and see absolutely every single flaw and not the achievements. So what I want to encourage you about is if you are going to start to go down that process of getting more explicit about building a great classroom climate, that really honest reflection is important. Let's see the flaws and let's work on them, but let's not blame ourselves for them. Let's see the positives, acknowledge them, celebrate them. Buy yourself an ice cream on the way home when you create a fantastic climate. But by no means do we need to say that that means that we're finished as educators. So be determined here to get into a positive, get into an honest cycle of reflection on your practice. And if you can use a couple of those frames like we looked at around encouragement and confrontation to be able to achieve that. And more than that, I guess, you'll get some really honest reflection by imagining yourself as a fly on the wall, or even being a fly on the wall with your students. Ensure that you eavesdrop on them, hear what they've got to say, because their conversations will very much reveal the type of climate or culture that you're building in your classroom. So look, what I wanted to do here, also, like I said, I hope that we haven't gone too fast for people. I hope that you've been able to take some notes from today, but I wanted to let you know also what you can do from here to be able to move forward. We're launching just this week the Teacher FastTrack, and I find it hard to be modest about this. I'm really excited about this program. I think that it is something that can really make a difference for teachers who want to have an environment where they can thrive and do their absolutely best work. So I wanted to show you just a little bit about that as a next step that you could take. So if you want a prospectus for the Teacher Fast Track, I guess the first thing is if you go, oh, that looks interesting, then you can go to the question box and just put the letters TFT in there, Teacher Fast Track. If you put a TFT in there, Chris is going to send you a prospectus straight away so that you can know a little bit more about the program. To give you a little idea, there's a web page here that we've set up that's dedicated to this new program. If you jump on there, you'll not only be able to download that prospectus, but you'll be able to click on the video with that rather strange-looking fellow on the left of it there, and in about 4 or 5 minutes you'll have a really, really strong understanding of what we're trying to do here. What we're trying to do is to commit to that ongoing nature, that ongoing work that we need to do to build fantastic climate with your teachers. You can register any of your teachers from this page, and we'll just take it from there and make their registration happen. In a nutshell, we send your teachers once a month a 30 to 60 minute video on one particular aspect of practice. We make sure that there are reflective questions that they answer, and we don't actually let them have the next video until they've actually done some reflection on how that can be applied to their context. We give you extra resources. For instance, in the IBP module, we will give you an IBP template and an instructional guide to that. In Module 3, we will give you the link to be able to download the Noise Down app, which assists teachers who are trying to achieve a decent level of classroom noise in there. And we'll give you lots of resources to underpin a change in climate development for your school and for your teachers. We get your teachers to nominate a local mentor who receives their reflections and knows exactly what it is that the teachers in the school are doing, so that you can have conversations locally about contextualising that knowledge. And look, the big thing that we think we're doing is we're taking some of that technology and some of that learning around the flipped classroom and saying, well, if it applies to kids, why not us? And so the use of video allows your teachers to consume the modules at a time that works for them, and they can watch it multiple times to make sure they understand it. I don't know if you're a bit like me. I sometimes watch a movie, and then when I watch it the next time, I actually understand the plot, and or I pick up certain things that I go, oh, I didn't see that the first time. So that's the theory behind using video here, rather than sending people off to a one-off PD and hoping they pick up something that they're going to implement in the school without anyone in the school being able to support them to do that. So we've created a program that we think can make a massive difference for your teachers, and we really want to make sure that they get an opportunity to get involved in that. So have a go and have a look at that webpage now. If you want to fill in that bit on the side there, whoops, if you want to fill in the little section on the side there, you'll be able to register a teacher straight away. We'll take it from there and make it happen for them. The great part is there's no start date. The Teacher Fast Track program begins for any teacher online today and any leader online. It begins when you want it to begin. So we'll be making that happen at a pace and a path that works for you. The other thing I want you to do is go and have a look around the new Real Schools website. Super excited that this week we launched this baby. So go and have a bit of a look at the new approach that we have. Well, not the new approach, but we've got a new way of letting you know about it, which we think is a much simpler way for people to access what Real Schools is all about. So make sure you get on there. And if you're a member, there's a new member login that you can use there, and it's a much easier way for you to access your membership resources, all those articles. And then I want to make sure that you also, today we're going to have a little bit of Q&A here to finish. We've got about 7 minutes or so left to be able to achieve that. And if you've got a then what I want you to do, I'm going to look in that question box. I'm going to flick backwards and forwards on my control panel to see if anyone's got a hand up. And let's see if we've got any questions about today. But around that Real School stuff, if you're looking for anything about membership or partnership or the Fast Track or the executive coaching that we're doing, then just pop that word in here while we're having a chat, and we're going to make sure that we send you any information that you might need to be able to take the next step. So like I said, we've got about six minutes or so to go. So I'm looking for anybody who might have a question today. And if you want to ask a question, the best way to do that is either verbally by putting your hand up, or by just going to that question box and putting it in there. So I'm going to keep a really close eye out here and see if I have any questions. I'll give you just a moment to have a good think, and let's see where we go. Other than that, we might have people who are really keen to go and start their Thursday afternoon. So I'm looking for a hand up. I'll give you a little bit longer. Looking for a question in the question box. So we might have people who are very exhausted. No, we don't. We've got Amanda, and I think I'm not sure if it's Amanda still got her hand up from before. What I am going to do is I'm going to go to Vikram. Vikram Salhotra. I hope I've got that right. Vikram, I'm just going to come to you now and unmute you. Vikram, can you hear me? Fabulous, Vikram. I've got you very, very loosely and quietly there, so I'm hoping that your question comes through loud and clear to everyone. Fire away. What would you like to say? Sorry, Vikram, we can't pick you up right at the moment. I don't know if anyone else can, but if you move to a slightly different spot, perhaps. Vikram, I might cut you off there just because I'm not hearing you, and I don't want that to interfere. So I'm just going to mute you again, Vikram. If you can, mate, put very quickly in the question box there what your question is, and I'll try to get to that before we finish. We've got Joanna also who's put a question in here for us. Joanna, you want to know how do I discuss with a student an extreme behaviour such as excessive swearing? Joanna, I'm going to try to unmute you first, and if not, I'm going to go. I'm going to go back to your question as it's written. So, Joanna, can you hear me? Joanna, we're in great luck today. I don't know, we've got a bit of feedback there. Can you hear me, Joanna? We're going really well here, aren't we? I'm going to mute Joanna and just go to her question as it's written. Okay, so which is how do I discuss with a student an extreme behaviour such as swearing? So what we've got here is what we know about behaviour. We tend to have the most success changing behaviours one at a time. So for many of us, we'll have that friend that gets up at New Year's Eve with a bottle of Jack Daniels under their belt and tell us that they're going to give up drinking, smoking, swearing, kicking the dog, swearing in front of the children. They're going to give up reality TV and they're going to join a gym. And we know that when they bite off multiple behaviours like that, that they're very unlikely to achieve any of them. So what we try to do, the behaviour that sometimes we make a mistake around, the way we make a mistake around behaviour sometimes is we're hoping that we can address one behaviour while we address others with the student. So Joanna, for me, I would be looking to get very clear about how we can firstly reward this student for the absence of swearing or the replacement of swearing with polite language. How can we reward them at first regularly, then randomly, and then rarely? And how can we get a really explicit plan in place that uses their strengths and interests to be able to wear? So Joanna, if you drop us a line also at info@realschools.com, pop that address on the screen in just a minute for you. We're going to make sure that we send you an individual behaviour plan. So that you can use that. And it's also, Joanna, if you're going to look, it's one of our previous webinars, so you can actually spend an hour sitting down working out how you can get somewhere. Glenn, I'm going to answer your question now, which is, we would like to change the community's perspective of our school culture. What would our first steps be? Glenn, my short answer to that would be, very first up, is that most of the trouble that we have with communicating with community is that we have something called a communication plan. And I think that they are all blending into each other, and every school is communicating in much the same way. I would like your school to develop an over-communication plan. So one of the mistakes we make around communication is that we communicate around all of the things that we would like to tell them about, and not the things that are really important to why they send their kids to school. So let's start to communicate on multiple channels, not just the newsletter. Recent research says that about 7.8% of parents are actually reading our newsletters. So not just the newsletter, but we want to communicate with them through social media, through assemblies, through face-to-face meetings, and we want to start communicating about practice. How is it that we do teaching and learning? How is it that we do conflict resolution? How is it that we do relationship building? Is a very important first start. So I just want to say thanks because I'm mindful that we're running out of time, and it is for most people late on a Thursday afternoon. If there is information that you would like as a result of today, make sure that you drop us a line or give us a call, and certainly make sure that you have a good look around our website. And the last thing I want to do is to make absolutely certain that I let our leaders online, or indeed our aspiring leaders online, aware of the next webinar that we're going to be running. It's going to be on Thursday the 19th of March at 3:30. What we're talking about here is the practice shift. So basically what we're on about here is that most leaders have become fantastic leaders because, or have been promoted into leadership positions because they were fantastic teachers. Unfortunately, the skill set for being a fantastic teacher is very different to the skill set of empowering and supporting and growing the teachers who are going to work under you and with you. So what we want to look at is, what is that skill set? What is it that really great leaders in schools do around the idea of building better practice in your classrooms? And there's certainly a very different skill set that needs to be explored there. So hoping you're excited by that, we're going to send you a link to that, and hope that you might jump on board. Well, I'm going to let you have a fantastic Thursday afternoon. I'm hoping we got our timing right because it says about 5 seconds left to me. So have a great afternoon, everyone. Really looking forward to working with you again. Really looking forward to following up. We'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.